How will things shake out at the wide receiver position for the San Francisco 49ers in 2024? Now, after drafting a first-round rookie in Ricky Pearsall, what about that sneaky fourth-rounder with a lot of speed in Jacob Cowing as well? Who's getting phased out? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock here with a very special guest on this Winky Wednesday episode, Mr. Nicholas Winkler. Croc is out. He's traveling for the next couple of days. Got a special guest, Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, to break down the entire draft for the San Francisco 49ers on tomorrow's program as well, which is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started.
Nicholas Winkler, come on down.
Yeah, it's that time. It's Winky Wednesday time. The voice of the fan, my former radio colleague, my former podcast co-host, now joins us weekly just to chat about the San Francisco 49ers here, Mr. Nicholas Winkler. Wink, how you doing, man? Are you getting pumped to see some of these players now that the 49ers drafted? They're going to start hitting the practice field and OTAs, and we know what their uniform numbers might be. Hopefully some of those change, like some ugly numbers out there. How you feeling right now, a week out now of the 49ers draft class?
Yeah, I mean, immediately after the draft, I was excited. I was like, okay, they got some firepower here. I like this. I like what they did. I think that they added to what they had already and made themselves better. And then, here we are a week later, and I've been watching film. I've been watching a lot on these guys now that they're actually 49ers. I'm not the type that can sit there and watch every prospect, in college football and be like, I want that guy, I want that guy. But once they're a 49er, then I'm in. So the Ricky Pearsall stuff, like, I get it. I get why they got him in the first round. Like, he's an exciting player. You know how I feel about Isaac Guerrero. Like, he's good. And I like that you mentioned Cowing because I want to get to him in a little bit too.
Yeah, they're an interesting group right now at wide receiver, are the San Francisco 49ers. And before we get too far, let's start with what your scouting report is on these guys. When you watch these players, what do you think and how do you think they fit with the 49ers here? Because they're two players that I can see why you like them. I can see why they were drafted. I can see why they were drafted where they were drafted. So when you do put on the tape and you start watching Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing, what do you see, Wink? What do you see that gets you excited? What do you think that maybe it could be something that they need to work on as they transition to the NFL?
Yeah, to me, they could both just slide in tomorrow as slot receivers in this offense. I mean, I love Juwan Jennings. I'm a big fan, have been since he became a 49er, since they drafted him, like the 7th round. Like, I've been a Juwan Jennings fan, but I feel like there's a cap to what he can do, right? So he doesn't have that kind of next level ability, which I think Pearsall does, which I think that he's tough, he's strong, he's fast, he's quick, he moves, he fits perfectly in this Kyle Shanahan offense. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, Cowing, like, why did they go after this guy when they just got Pearsall? And you watch his tape and he's so fast and he's so strong, but he's a little guy. But he doesn't play like, he plays like he's that little dog, in the fight. And there's like a big dog and that little dog doesn't know he's a little dog. And he's the one doing all the barking and this and that. And then he attacks. And you watch Cowing and I feel like that's him. But he can back it up because you see him out there. And if the ball's not to him, he's not just standing around watching. He's downfield making blocks. He's trying to get over to his guy to set up another block. I mean, he is another just prototypical wide receiver for this Kyle Shanahan offense, a guy that's willing to do whatever it takes to get out there and play football. And I think they got two good ones here. And that's going to really make it tough, for guys like Chris Conley and Danny Gray and the guys kind of towards the bottom of that wide receiving list, because there's a lot of guys, a lot of names on there that are good football players in the NFL. But I think these two guys are going to immediately, once you see them on the OTAs and things like that, I think I'm going to start jumping over some of these guys and moving up the chain.
For sure, camp competition. I think the interesting parallel between both of those receivers, and I think you nailed it with they could both jump in and play a slot role immediately. And they should be available to do that depending on how snaps shake out for these guys as rookies. And they're up for the fight, which I think is important because a lot of people have compared Ricky Pearsall and what his ability was in college to another 49ers draft bust and a Kyle Shanahan former favorite in Dante Pettis that they moved up to get in 2018 in the draft, being loose, a guy who, can operate over the middle of the field. But Pettis was such a finesse player, and he wasn't up to the fight. And Pearsall is, and Cowing is. Now, they're not the strongest guys. And will they be knocked off their routes? Will they run through arm tackles like Deebo Samuel? Well, no, because they don't really have that power, in their body. And, Cowing is up to the fight, but then there'll be a DB that just like corrals him with one arm and tackles him, right? But he's fighting for it, right? So it's important to be up for the fight and be able to make the catches in traffic because sometimes these guys don't even catch the ball before they're hit. It's one thing to go down once you're hit and you're fighting for yards and you get at least one extra yard, a couple extra yards. So they play bigger in some ways, but they're not big guys and they're not power players, so they're not power forwards. They're point guard, shooting guard, and those are the roles they're going to play for the 49ers. And what's interesting is the 49ers do have a power forward in Juwan Jennings too. So how do they utilize this? And I've been talking about how the 49ers need to do a better job of putting together a basketball roster with their wide receiver group. And one of the things they're missing is a little bit more speed, which they have now. And you can kind of see how some roles, I still think they're missing that small forward, that kind of, I guess Ayuk is that now, but he's more of a two guard to me, that more linear X receiver. They still don't have that. Kyle Shanahan doesn't care about that. He cares about the middle of the field, right? Aggressively intermediate is what I call Kyle Shanahan's offense. And when you watch Ricky Pearsall, he screams aggressively intermediate. Like that's what he is. He gets open over the middle of the field. He's not afraid to make catches in traffic. He'll give you some after the catch if there's space. He's not going to run through arm tackles like Deebo Samuel or anything like that. So we'll see how the run after catch translate with both of those players, because I think strength's a big part of it, but they're up to the challenge, which I think is important. You have to have the mentality that you can handle the NFL and the physicality of it. And they're both older prospects. They both played a lot of football, and I think they're going to be up to that challenge. And hopefully they can avoid the Kyle Shanahan doghouse early and be able to contribute early in their careers.
Well, let's be honest, even if they do end up in that doghouse, it can work for some guys. Like it didn't work for Pettis, but it worked for Ayuk. So it just depends on how mentally tough these guys are too, right? Coming into the season. I'm really glad you brought up Pettis too. I don't remember, you used to say his style of play was like bendy or something, or there was a way you used to describe.
Yeah, he's a bendy guy. Just his bones looked flexible or something, the way he moved around, and he was loose, a lot like Ricky Pearsall. And I think Kyle Shanahan on tape probably saw a lot of what he saw on Pearsall. He probably saw a lot of those things in Dante Pettis. Dante Pettis just wasn't as tough mentally, and from all reports and just watching how they play, Pearsall is kind of a finesse guy just because he's not huge and not strong. And even though he's 6'1", 190-ish, that's kind of big on paper, but he doesn't necessarily play big as far as his strength. Like he'll get knocked off of his routes. You can tackle him once you get your hands on him, but he's competitive and he'll make catches at the catch point. And I think one of the biggest difficulties for college players transitioning to the NFL is winning dirty, is what I call it. And it's very true for wide receivers. And I think that's where Dante Pettis failed. Is it's easy to be it's easy to end a football game and have a clean jersey and be like, I'm just quicker than these guys. And, it's easy. It's easy as a pass rusher when the offensive line in front of you is just slow and you run around them and collect sacks. It doesn't happen in the NFL. The guys are also athletic, and you have to be able to win through contact. You have to be up for the challenge and the fight of making contact for 60 minutes of a football game. And so it's mentality more than anything. And you have to have the physicality to fight through that contact. So that's the question I have with Pearsall and really Jacob Cowing as well, is even if they're up to the challenge, can they physically fight through the contact? Like, Cowing's the smallest receiver in the class. He was not only short, 5'3" and 3, or 5'8" and 3/8. He's not 5'3". That'd be fun to watch.
Whoa. Muggsy Bogues out there? Right.
5'8" and 3/8. So a little over 5'8", 165 pounds. Like that is small and short. And while you see him be competitive, it's like a 6'2" corner is still going to get his hands on you, and if he does, it could be over. And even Ricky Pearsall at 6'1", he's not a power player, and he has had some trouble with press, and you can see him get knocked off his routes sometimes, which is why I don't like the comparisons to Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is a borderline tight end the way he plays physically, right? And Cooper Kupp, those guys are strong at the catch point, or strong. Pearsall's pretty good at the catch point, but they're strong through contact and like getting off the line of scrimmage and fighting through it. And Pearsall's not that, so that's probably something that he'll have to work on. But he's a grinder, and he's all about ball. And the mental toughness looks like it's there with both these receivers, and it's so important. And it's especially important for wide receivers, and it's something we forget. And I think that's why wide receivers are so weird, and they're kind of like diva psychopaths, and like, because you only get 10 chances a game. And that's if you're one of the top guys. You might only get 3 chances a game, and you have to be mentally tough and prepared for those 3 and make those count, and not have 2 drops on those 3 targets, and then get every yard that's available, and then be an asset and block, especially for Kyle Shanahan's offensive block in between those plays where you're not getting targeted, and run the proper route so that other guys are getting open when that's your role, so there's a lot to it. And that's why some guys take a little detour through the dog house, and some guys never get out of it with Kyle Shanahan. So it remains to be seen, but it does feel like these guys fit 49ers mold with that mentality, and they're up for the challenge, and obviously aggressively intermediate. Yeah, I think those boxes are checked with both those guys.
I really like the thought of them in the wide receiver room with Ayuk, who's gone through that, right? Gone through the doghouse and this and that. Maybe he could be like, hey, don't do that. I did that. Look what, I missed a whole basically year of my career because of that. And then you're also in there with a guy like Deebo Samuel, who could be like, check it out. Here's how you run through a guy, like, okay, give him one of these, like they're going to be teammates. These are guys that they want to win. They want these guys to succeed. I think it's a perfect time to bring in 2 young guys that can learn from these 2 veterans who have done it now, over a good period of time in the NFL for the 49ers.
Next, let's talk about targets. How many targets are there to go around? I don't know if there's 2 more wide receivers worth of targets available, even if the 49ers throw the ball more in 2024 than they did in 2023. Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL playoffs, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. And yeah, you can bet on the NFL, even though it's the offseason. 49ers, the betting favorite at FanDuel to win the next Super Bowl. How about offensive and defensive rookies of the year? How about Ricky Pearsall to have the most regular season receiving yards amongst rookies in the 2024 season? Currently 35-1 odds to be that player. And I'm going to paint the picture in a little bit why he could be that guy. And he's the 12th on the list. There's 11 receivers ahead of him, and there were 11 receivers drafted ahead of Ricky Pearsall in the first round for those odds. So you can find those and a whole lot more at FanDuel, and of course those playoff games. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you're going to win prop bets on the overs on Ricky Pearsall for receiving yards, and being rookie of the year and leading all rookies in receiving yards, someone's going to have to get traded or hurt. I think it's the bottom line there. And I think fans should probably slow down on expectations statistically for Pearsall, and especially Cowing, because where are the snaps and where are the targets going to come from? Wink. Let me break down what the target share was last year in the 49ers offense. Number 1 was Brandon Ayuk. He led the 49ers in targets and receptions. 105 targets for Brandon Ayuk, 75 catches. George Kittle, next, 90 targets, caught 65 of those. Deebo Samuel had 1 fewer target, 89. So essentially they're kind of, the second, tied for second place there are George Kittle and Deebo Samuel with passing game targets, 60 catches for Deebo Samuel there. And then Christian McCaffrey comes in 4th, 83 targets with 67 receptions. Obviously a lot shorter yards per catch in the, shorter targets there for Christian McCaffrey. Then we get all the way to 5th now, the number 3 wide receiver, but the 5th overall target getter in the 49ers offense last year was Juwan Jennings, only 33 targets. That surprises me, and I already knew the number was low. Only 33 targets, 19 catches for Juwan Jennings. And 12 of those were first downs of those 19 catches. That's why he's called Third and Juwan. Kyle Juszczyk next, 17 targets, 14 catches. Then you get to Ray McLeod, who had only 15 targets and only 12 catches last year for 135 yards. Ronnie Bell, 13 targets, 6 catches. And then you got, Connolly, 3 catches. Jordan Mason, a couple catches. Elijah Mitchell had 6 catches. It's pretty slim in a passing game that is not high volume. And even with Brock Purdy and the yards he put up, it was a collection of a lot of different receivers, and it's not a super high volume passing game. It's a high efficiency passing game, Wink. So when you look at that, let's say, Debo missed some time. He was nicked up a little bit. Multiple players were nicked up a little bit. Nobody missed a massive amount of time amongst those receivers. So if everyone's pretty healthy, I don't think rookie Ricky Pearsall, Wink, is going to break through and get more targets than Brandon Ayuk or George Kittle or Debo Samuel or Christian McCaffrey. And that's nearly 400 of the 471 targets that the offense had, period. And so if, let's say, let me put it this way and ask you the question. Is Juwan Jennings going to get completely phased out? Is he someone that could get traded before the season even starts? Could a rookie just come in and take his spot, and all of a sudden Juwan Jennings is sitting on the bench on Sundays? So you would have to add up Juwan Jennings targets and Ray McLeod's targets and phase out the fullback and Kyle Juszczyk. And what are we talking about there? Maybe 50 targets and 40 catches or something like that for rookie Ricky Pearsall, right? And I think that alone, if you replaced all those guys, would probably be disappointing to a lot of fans for a first-round wide receiver.
Yeah, I think you're right on all fronts there. I mean, I don't see Juwan Jennings get traded. I think he has a role in this offense. He is that big, tall possession receiver that's going to go get you a first down. And again, he was one catch away in the Super Bowl from maybe being Super Bowl MVP. This is a guy that
you can't go play basketball. We just talked about the basketball team. Yeah. You're going to roll out there with 4 shooting guards and George Kittle?
I mean, I'm glad you said George Kittle, because to me, when you were listing all those targets and everything, like that worried me the most. What if something happens to George Kittle? Who's going to step up as the receiving tight end? I don't think it's on the roster right now. I don't think that that's a spot that the 49ers can just plug and play someone. Like, is that when they move to more 3 wide receiver, 4 wide receiver sets? Like, is that when you would see more Pearsall and maybe even start to see Cowing and stuff like that? I hope not.
Kittle, Ayuk. I mean, a lot of those receivers, I think everyone except for maybe Christian McCaffrey, because he's used so much already, you can't envision more touches for him. I think you could make the argument like, oh man, I think most fans, you'd say, hey, maybe get George Kittle more targets, and be like, yeah, I think so. Hey, maybe get Brandon Ayuk more targets. Sure, yeah. And like, well, wait a second, the targets aren't there. Like, how much more would the 49ers have to throw the ball? Like, they could attempt 500 passes instead of 471. That's 29 more targets out there. And where do those go? So, I think statistically it's going to be rough. But Debo Samuel gets hurt, season-ending injury, something crazy like that. Now you're talking about, okay, you slide into the Z starting wide receiver role for Ricky Pearsall. And then now you got the Ray McLeod role wide open for Jacob Cowing, which is probably what the idea would be for 2025 in year 2. Mm-hmm. But it would take a big-time injury to one of these top players, I think, for Ricky Pearsall and probably for Cowing to hardly see the field at all in year 1 as rookies.
I mean, let's be honest. If I was going to set some sort of over-under right now for Pearsall, I wouldn't put it at more than like 25 catches. I mean, that's assuming that everybody stays healthy. That to me is like, okay, that would, I think, be a pretty good rookie season. I would like to see that as a 49er fan, because that would mean that Ayuk's out there, Debo's out there, Kittle's still playing, McCaffrey's playing. None of these guys are missing time, because if they miss time, that number could obviously skyrocket for Pearsall. And if you're asking me about Cowing too, I mean, Does he even see the field? I don't know. I don't know if he's going to have a role if everybody can stay healthy, even as a backup, even as a special teams guy. Maybe he's going to be that kickoff guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see a lot of this from Jacob Cowing. He's going to. I think he'll probably return punts. I think that's probably the role, and that's probably that part. I think that part of Ray McLeod, Jacob Cowing could probably, and God forbid he fumbles and muffs a punt, and then he's doghouse for the rest of the year, right? And there's not going to be offensive snaps. He's 10th on the list with what the 49ers have there with all these weapons at different positions. So that'll be fascinating to see how these guys, how quickly they're able to compete and prove to Kyle Shanahan, who's notoriously tough on rookies and wide receivers in the position he played, to earn touches with the way the team is put together. And it's good for the team to be this strong at that position, but it's just not great for the rookie statistic outlook. And I would say probably start taking the unders on those for Ricky Pearsall, because unless there's a big injury, there's not a really good path for him to be hugely statistically successful this year. I think a lot of this draft is probably a lot more about 2025 and beyond, which most drafts are, which is why I think one of the problems, and I don't know if this is a problem I necessarily have with it, and I want to ask you this next, Wink, is, okay, targeting older prospects, 23, 24 years old, fifth year, sixth year seniors, like the 49ers did with a lot of their draft picks and including both of those wide receivers. If they're not going to play right away anyway, should you maybe target those higher upside players at more impact positions that it's harder to find? Defensive linemen, offensive tackles. Did the 49ers fail in that regard, since we're projecting their first round receiver might only catch 20, 25 passes anyway as a rookie? So we'll get to that topic and talk a little bit about the Tom Brady roast. What we can talk about on this podcast next.
Yes.
This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, scoreboard not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, you lift up your head, and you say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime. Tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. So much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, crush landmarks with wrecking balls, and of course, charge other players rent on those iconic Monopoly properties. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. So I posed a little question to you there, Wink. And it's been asked of me multiple times, and I've kind of thought about it and pondered it. And we've seen the Brock Purdy and Trey Lance thing. Is that partially informing where the 49ers went in this draft? Is it just because, weird COVID stuff and we're getting a lot of fifth, sixth year seniors, and it's just the phase, and that's what the college game is giving the pro game. And so that's what the 49ers have to take and draft from. But the idea of high upside 20, 21-year-old versus a player who's been in college and is, a professional basically at the college level, already has a degree, working on a second degree, sixth year senior, transferred 2-3 schools already, and is a full grown adult, 23, 24 years old. What I think of is, okay, where would you have drafted Ricky Pearsall in 2021 when he was 20, when he finished his age 20 season? You know what I mean? Versus a guy who finished his age 20 season just now and is in the draft, has all this ability. So there's like a nature versus nurture sort of an argument, an upside argument. Do you want most of the development to happen already? Shelf lives are so short anyway. Does it matter? Right. If you're going to get the best 5 years out of a guy, might as well get it in the late 20s instead of the earlier 20s. It's a big question, something I've been struggling with. What do you think about that idea of older prospects and, guys who after their fifth year option will be 29 years old versus maybe a player that rolls into the league as a true junior that might have a lot more growth, but you have to do that coaching at the pro level, especially if none of these guys are going to start and play a huge role as rookies anyway.
So to me, I think it's a culture thing, right? I think the 49ers have always been locker room guys. They're just like, okay, we need guys that are going to come in here, fit what we do, not cause, commotion, not make waves, just come in here. This is it. Follow this. This is what you do. And that's probably easier on a little bit more mature young adult, right? So you get these guys that have been playing for 4 or 5, sometimes 6 years in college, and you're a football team that's ready to win now. You don't have time to develop a guy for 1, 2, 3 years. Like, you need a guy that's going to be ready to step in if something happens to one of your stars, because you expect to go win the Super Bowl this year. That's your goal. Win, win, win. That's it. There's no rebuild right now. There's no let's plan for the future. It's let's win now and let's worry about now. So to me, it makes perfect sense why the 49ers did that.
Did you catch the Tom Brady roast, Wink? And I asked you that question knowing already that you did catch it, and I haven't quite finished it yet. First of all, it was long, and it was a live broadcasted thing. But Kyle Shanahan, by the way, was there, and I enjoy the roast format. And they, it's not for folks that are easily offended, right? Especially those that are participating. If you participate in the roast, you're opening yourself up to something. And before I watched it, I was, and in fact, I think I was recording a podcast while it was happening live and went back and watched it later. But like, I saw Aaron Hernandez trending on Twitter, and I'm like,
everyone.
Okay. And Giselle actually came up today and was like upset about, how much their marriage was put out there. And it was like, yeah, well, that's it's gonna happen. And so yeah, you open yourself up to everything. I thought Brady did a great job. There was some of the comedians are just phenomenal at writing these jokes, and I was dying. Like just some brutal stuff, and nothing, obviously is off limits in those situations. And just the roast format, knowing how these jokes get written and stuff. And, the joke writers are writing jokes for the players. And it's funny watching the players try to deliver the joke. And I'm like kind of cringing sometimes. I'm like, hey, player, you don't have to go, hey, get it and rib the elbows. Like, everyone gets the joke, just deliver the joke, but they're like, that's not their forte. This isn't, but some of them did a really good job. I think Drew Bledsoe did a really good job too. He was, I think, the first one. But no, it was phenomenal, and some of the jokes were pretty brutal. And I don't know, I just wanted your thoughts on it, and who you thought had the best set in that group.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Hart was great, as the host of the night kind of thing, and he just kept. It was really funny because he kept being like, "You're so stupid, Tom. Like, why would you do this? Why would you? You're dumb. You're an idiot. Why are you going to sit here for 3 hours?"
Yeah, Kevin Hart, he takes the job, and he knows it's just going to be, 50% short jokes about him anyway.
Nonstop. And it was. And every one of them was funny.
I find it fascinating because these are comedians that are the top of their game at writing these jokes. And the short joke is coming, but how can they write the joke to surprise you by it every time, right? Because a lot of the jokes are the same. Like, the only reason they invited Kim Kardashian was so they had more jokes to write about somebody else, right? Like, that's the reason everyone's on stage, is there's more things to write jokes about. And so it's funny to see how
jokes.
Yeah. Yeah, like the craft of writing a joke is what I find fascinating when I'm watching a roast. And some of these, I mean, Nikki Glaser and Tony Hinchcliffe was just brutal. I mean, it's like, and he was scorched earth, one right after the other. And that's where some of these comedians just shine with some of these, and really good sports by everybody up there, and Bill Belichick too, so that's fun to see.
Yeah, I think Nikki Glaser was maybe the best. She just, her timing is perfect, and she was just on point with every one of her jokes. And yeah, Bill Belichick coming. I mean, and a surprise, drop in of Ron Burgundy. Like, come on, if you haven't seen it yet, just go see it just to see Ron Burgundy show up. Like, that was fantastic.
Yeah, they held some stuff back that you didn't know was going to happen. Didn't know, because they're telling jokes about Belichick, but he wasn't on the panel. And then all of a sudden he comes walking out, Ron Burgundy. You didn't know he was going to be there at all. And it wasn't just Will Ferrell. He was playing the role of Ron Burgundy. And I don't know. It's worth it. Yeah. If you got the stomach for the roast format. Yeah.
It's very cringe-worthy, right? There's a lot of times you're like, oh, how could you say that? And, that's what you do at a roast. And they keep saying that too. They keep reminding you, like, look, this is what we do. This is a roast, guys. Don't get mad at me.
Yeah, these aren't these are jokes. This isn't how we feel about life. This is these are jokes. And it's so you gotta and you gotta know if you're Tom Brady to put yourself out there and know that that's coming, and the camera's on you for 3 hours while people are just crushing you. But he withstood it, you know.
Yeah,
he withstood the pressure in the pocket.
Oh, I think the best line in the whole thing was Kevin Hart coming out and be like, all right, we're here to toast the GOAT quarterback. Oh, Joe Montana's here? Joe Montana's here? Oh, where's Joe Montana? Where's the GOAT? So good.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That was amazing.
Great way to kick it off.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you listen to your podcasts. And Croc, not back tomorrow, but my guest will be Trevor Sikkema, the lead draft analyst for Now Pro Football Focus, former Locked On NFL draft host. He'll be with me to break down the San Francisco 49ers draft right here, Locked On 49ers.